Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a truly fascinating journey into the declassified archives of the CIA. Our sources are two unique sets of documents, both released under the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Act of 1992. Our mission really is to pull the most compelling insights from these files. First up, we'll get an inside look at the CIA's operational realities in 1978. The challenges, the key players. Then we'll pivot to something quite different, an unexpected deep dive into decades-old index records focusing on a very prominent American family. We're here to connect the dots, unearth some surprising facts, and give you a shortcut to understanding these hidden slices of history.
Yeah, these documents really offer a remarkable dual perspective. On one hand, you get the day-to-day nuts and bolts, the bureaucracy, the human stuff. But on the other, there's this wider historical lens on how agencies meticulously cataloged info on people for decades. It's a really interesting blend.
Okay, so let's unpack this first set. It primarily comes from a DDO staff meeting brief, #32, that's dated February 2010, 1978. And there's a routing sheet from the next day, too. Now, DDO, for our listeners, that's the Directorate of Operations, basically the covert arm of the CIA. So this brief, it paints quite a picture of their world in the late 70s.
Right, and what's particularly striking here is the viewpoint from the DDCI, the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence. He actually attended this meeting. He's noted down as appreciating the Directorate's ability to work directly with him, which, sounds like a pat on the back, but maybe it's more like boosting morale, reinforcing loyalty, especially in a directorate under intense scrutiny.
That makes sense. Like his open door policy wasn't just about solving problems.
Exactly. It was likely about fostering direct trust, too, maybe bypassing some bureaucracy to keep things agile.
But it definitely wasn't all smooth sailing. The document mentions that on his very first day, Mr. Carlucci was thrown into direct confrontation with the department over the state CIA liaison, end quote. Says there were strong emotions about a treaty, and he was hoping to find ways to resolve things. Wow, that sounds like a tough start.
Oh, absolutely. That immediate clash really highlights the friction you often get between government departments, right? Even when they're supposedly working towards the same goals. And the deputy director back in Carlucci, that suggests some pretty high-stakes power dynamics. They clearly wanted to shift focus towards more substantive issues, such as internal reporting responsibilities, communications, and cover, trying to streamline things amidst the politics.
So it wasn't just interagency stuff. It sounds like they were also facing real challenges out in the field. The document specifically mentions a special paper on cover problems in Africa. What does that tell us about the practical difficulties?
Well, that's a crucial detail. Cover is, it's the bedrock of covert ops. Plausible deniability, protecting sources, agents. Needing a whole paper just on Africa suggests they were hitting serious, maybe systemic roadblocks there. Protecting assets, maybe? Keeping operations deniable, and all this while facing more scrutiny from the outside.
Right, the external pressures. The documents even mention congressional interest in Hughes-Ryan-type procedures. That's, for our listeners, that refers to the rules about telling Congress about covert ops. Really highlights that tightrope walk between secrecy and accountability.
Absolutely. And the document points out two big headaches for the Senate committee back then. First, just defining what counts as a sensitive operation. Where do you draw that line? And second, okay, once you decide it is sensitive, how much background do you give Congress so they can judge it properly without, compromising everything? It really lays bare that inherent tension in democratic oversight. Plus, there's a mention of a letter from Dr. Brzezinski, plans for new political reporting in 32 key countries, even a tentative reorganization plan for the directorate. It was clearly a time of intense reevaluation.
And beyond all the high-level policy talk, the documents also give us a peek at the people involved, actual names. We see personnel announcements from February 78, John H. Kinney assigned to Ankara, Ralph C. Hughes Jr. to Amman, Jack Agino to Colombo, Thomas A. Twitton to New Delhi, Jeffrey Pennant to Lome. What can these specific assignments tell us at that really granular level?
That's a great question. Because each one, especially if it's a chief of station or deputy chief, it signals a strategic priority in that specific place. So a COS in Colombo, Sri Lanka. That points to a real focus on Southeast Asia then. This level of detail, the names, the global postings, it just confirms the huge global reach they had and how they were constantly shifting people around based on, hotspots and intelligence needs. It's a very real snapshot.
Okay, and that actually brings us nicely to our next set of documents. We're shifting from the CIA's internal dynamics to how they looked at people outside the agency historically. Our second set is quite different, but just as intriguing. It's an index search and 201 consolidation request from October 1978, and it's asking for records on Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and what's really striking here is how that one request triggers this massive search across decades of records, all tied to this one prominent family. And that notation, well, it could maybe mean community, but the pages that follow make it pretty clear what they were thinking.
Oh, and for listeners, a 201 file. That's
Yeah.
basically the CIA's term for a personality file, everything they've gathered on one person.
Yeah.
So this was a request to pull together someone's entire intelligence history.
And they certainly found stuff. The search lists loads of Vanderbilts with records going all the way back to 1946. Names like William, Neil, Gladys, Cornelius, Emerson, William H., George, Alfred Gwynn, Consuelo, Arthur, Jane. Quite a list. But the real focus, the likely reason for the search, seems to be Feliza Paez Vanderbilt. She's specifically noted down as the ex-wife of Cornelius Vanderbilt Jr., rumored to have been a communist or fellow traveler in Mexico. And that entry really underlines how interested intelligence agencies were historically in anyone, even folks connected to big American families, if they had perceived affiliations or did things deemed relevant to national security. You have to remember, this was before fancy data analytics. These huge physical index files were their big data. Imagine the work. Cross-referencing cards for decades, all based on a rumor. It shows a particular kind of vigilance, doesn't it?
It really does. And it gets even more specific, maybe a bit mysterious too. There's an FNU, Vanderbilt. FNU means first name unknown. This person was suspected of sabotage of one, if not both, of Cuban fishing boats in Callao Harbor. There were explosions on both boats. Plus, Alfred Gwynn Vanderbilt gets mentioned in connection with the World Veterans Federation. It's quite a mixed bag of associations and alleged activities.
It really is. And it raises that question about just how wide a net they cast, right? From political leanings to alleged sabotage to even involvement in seemingly harmless international groups. It shows the sheer breadth of what they collected, touching on all sorts of aspects of people's lives, their connections. Even within these really well-known families, you can see how these little bits and pieces, when you put them together, start painting a really complex picture of different intelligence threads, and just how far they'd follow any lead, no matter how tenuous it seemed.
Wow. What a journey through these files.
Ah.
From the intricate internal workings and the diplomatic tightropes of the CIA's Operations Directorate in '78, all the way to this surprisingly broad, detailed indexing of people like the Vanderbilts, going back decades. It truly shows the immense scope of the information gathered and how these seemingly small details can unlock these vast historical stories.
Indeed. These documents are, well, they're a powerful reminder that history isn't always in the big, grand narratives. Often it's right there in the meticulous details, routing slips, meeting notes, those massive index searches. They reveal both the day-to-day pressures, which were often messy, and the sort of historical curiosities that shaped intelligence gathering for generations. It's a really compelling look behind the curtain.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Maybe consider how these records, which seem so separate, pulled from different times and contexts, how they actually come together to paint this unique, detailed picture of intelligence priorities and methods. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much more historical context, how many more surprising connections are still just sitting there, hidden in plain sight within these declassified archives, just waiting for someone to connect the threads?